Hey everybody, it is Vicki Ross here. I've been thinking about this for, gosh, a long time. I'm fixing to sneeze. I was going to do an introduction where you could see, excuse me from the bottom of my heart. Anyway, I was going to do a face-forward introduction, and I may still, but when I move my video camera, it takes me forever to get it back, so we're going to start right here. This is a general, very general introduction to fine art pastels, soft pastels. Oil pastels are an oxymoron because they're not pastel. They're an oil stick, and that's enough about that. The only thing they have in common is the pastel at the end. Soft pastels were one of the very first media ever used, or mediums ever used, for portraiture way back in the 14th century, 15th century. Rembrandt used a form of, if I can get one, a form of a crayon made out of clay, and this is called, the brand is Conte Crayon. Generals makes one too, but they are not any good. Sorry, Generals. The Contes are perfectly square and perfectly flat, and they make a mark. In the old days, this was called red chalk. Now, soft pastels today have nothing in common with this. This is made from a clay, and it was all that was used for a lot of sketching like that. You can use it on the side. There are 1,000,001 techniques. There are 1,000,001 pastels and papers. So let's get right down to it. I'm going to take you on a path that's kind of like the one I took. And we're going to start with papers. One of the supports that has been a favorite forever is Canson pastel paper. Now this is an archival paper. It's acid free. And one side, I don't know if you can see it or not. One side, you can't, has a, let me see if I am fumble. I'm going to go in real close. Maybe you can see the texture. It's kind of a pebble. It's an all-over texture. And on the other side, it's smooth. And this is the way the paper is manufactured. However, there have been some professional pastel artists who have never worked on anything but this, and they make it just fine. It will hold 4 or 5 layers of pastel, and that's well and good. This I think you'll find more often as a drawing medium, more as a sketching pastel drawing type medium. So fast forward a bit, and a lady named Kitty Wallace, who's a superb artist, developed a paper called Wallace paper. And this feels like a fine grit sandpaper. Can you hear it? If I did that long enough, I would file my fingernails down. This paper can be wet. It is archival and acid free. Manufactured solely for pastel artists. Now, when this paper became popular, was it 15 years ago or so, the only sanded paper prior to that was one called, let me get this right, oh darn, I can't remember. It was actually a sandpaper from Germany, and it was used in industrial products. The problem with that paper was that it was not archival or acid free. A company named UART, U-A-R-T, started remanufacturing that paper, and it's similar to the Wallace paper. So this paper can take wet. It can take 10 or 15 layers of pastel. It can take just about anything you throw at it. That's sanded papers. There's Richardson sanded paper now, and also sanded boards. If y'all are familiar with, where is my brain today? Pastel board. It's Pastelboard, and it's manufactured by Ampersand. Some of you mixed media artists may be familiar with it from the clay board that they also manufacture. Basically, it's a hard board like this, like a little piece of masonite, and then it's got a proprietary patented coating on it that feels a little bit like the Wallace paper. It's not quite as coarse. You'll find some that are made with whatever. You'll find some that are made with marble dust, pumice stone, all kinds of stuff that they put in there to make a grit to hold the pastel. Okay? Now we're going to go into homemade grounds. This one has been kicking around my studio for about 15 years. If you want to do these, you buy this board at a lumber store, and you want to get the untreated. It's raw on both sides. They have one that's a coated surface, but it's got an asphalt component in it, and this is the raw material. And what you do here is you can take acrylic paint, and you can take pumice stone, and this is FFF finest grade. And when you get it on your fingers, it feels like powder, but it's actually got some grit in it. It's very, very fine. And you mix a little bit of this with your acrylic paint, maybe a little bit of water to make it a little more fluid, and paint it, and you can pre-tone your board. Pink is a garish color, but if you were going to paint a landscape on this and use greens, the pink will enrich the green. So that's an art technique. This particular piece of paper has a homemade grit on it, and a lot of artists love the texture that you can get, and they will up and add more, go back, whatever. They'll add coats. They'll actually mark in it to make textured surfaces for pastel use. You can see some right there where it's actually the person that made this put 2 sheets back to back before they were dry. I wonder who that was. So anyway, and this is just on a piece of cardstock Bristol paper. It's perfectly fine. Works great. So, let me get my colors I picked out already. Okay, soft pastels. I told you a little bit about the history, and I put a link to an ebook that I wrote 10 or so years ago that's pretty much what I'm talking about today, but more in detail, more depth, and lots of pictures to look at. So I will put a link to that ebook and give you a coupon code so you can get it for a couple bucks. Soft pastels are not chalk. I'm an art snot, and if you're going to talk about fine art, you're going to talk about correct terminology. Chalk is something you dig out of the ground, and you can write with it on a sidewalk to make hopscotch. That's chalk. It's a rock. It's a mineral. Bicarbonate, sodium bicarbonate, I think. No, that's baking soda. Anyway, calcite. Anyway, look it up. This is not chalk. This is the finest pigment available. And again, quality counts. So if you're into a student quality pastel, you're going to get a little bit less expensive pigment that they start with, and they put binder in the raw pigment to make it stick, make it hold together into a stick form, like this. The more binder, so you start with inexpensive pigments, okay? That those pigments may not be, they may be synthetic, they may not be pure pigment, whatever. But anyway, it's a less expensive pigment. And then different binders are put in this. It might be gum arabic, it might be, nobody talks about their recipes. So, binder for pastel. Now, the different binders, the student grades have more binder. More binder makes a harder soft pastels. They're all soft pastels, but you've got hard soft pastels and you have extremely soft pastels. These have very little binder. They crumble easily, but they make the most glorious marks. Let me get the blue one. I am just barely touching that on my skin. Now this is a hard one, same color. Barely touching my skin. So if you want to use these, you have to apply more pressure. More pressure means that it will fill up the tooth of your paper faster. So I have here I've been thinking about doing this for you guys for a while, and I saw these student grade Master's Touch, that's Hobby Lobby's private brand, soft pastels. It was 12 colors for $6. And I've got a baby that needs to go outside. So let me do that and I will be back. I just went through that whole little spiel without the camera on. Thank you, Hairy Kid number 2. I don't know where I was. I broke all these in pieces. I told you that Holbein is an artist quality hard pastel. I pulled some colors that were very similar to the colors in this kit. And then I went back and pulled a very soft pastel in those colors. When you work in pastel, you always keep a scrap piece of paper to the side so you can see what color you've actually got. The other thing about pastels is that the professional brands, the artist quality brands, the oldest pastel that's manufactured still today is Rocher Pastels. They're manufactured in Paris. They're manufactured by hand. And Isabelle Rocher is a 4th generation descendant of the original Rocher, who made pastels for Degas, Mary Cassatt, and he developed the color line strictly for those artists. There are, at the time, in the 1800s, early 1900s, there were 1,800 colors, 1,800 different sticks. In that line, you will find, say that you want ultramarine blue. In that line, you will find that there's the darkest or the purest ultramarine blue. They add white to it to get it to the lightest tone. It barely has any pigment in it. They add dark or black to get to the darkest tone of the blue. The reason why you need at least 3 or 4 in a value range is so that if you're going from a dark to a light sky and you're just wanting to use ultramarine, you can start toward the top with the darker tone that you have, and slowly change the sticks until you come down to your lightest tone at the skyline. An intermediate pastel artist should have at least 3 to 4 values in a particular color. Rembrandt pastels made in Amsterdam are one of the older brands, and they have somewhere around 250 colors. And most of those intermediate brands, medium hardness, artist quality, but maybe on the lower end, they're manufactured by machine, so the more expensive pastels are manufactured by hand. And I am droning. Anyway, Rembrandt is a great workhorse pastel. Now, if you're working on a piece of art, and that's what we're talking about here, we're not talking about crafts and journals and stuff like that. We're talking about learning how to use them in the same manner an artist does. So, at the low end, you have these. At the very high end, highest end, you have Rocher. In the middle, you have Art Spectrum, which is this company, manufactures a set similar to Rembrandt. You have Terry Ludwig's, which are these square ones. They're handmade in the U.S. You have Unison, which is a higher end pastel. It's manufactured in England. I don't have any Diane Townsend, but they are excellent. They're manufactured in New York. And there you have it. Like any other art form, you can dig into it as deep as you want. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So, let me get this out of the way. Oh, I brought this out to show you. This is Sennelier. It's another Parisian company. And very soft. Their color line is huge. I don't know how many. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about different values per color. For example, this is Madder Violet, and it comes in 5 ranges of Madder Violet. Some companies like Unison, when they get their when they do their main tone, their pure pigment tone that's in the middle. And in order to get darker, they will add the complement of the color, which also makes it grayer. And some companies use black and white to get the value range. So it just depends on what the company is like, what their formula is. And like I said, they don't share it. But look at this box of Yummy. There are people who will do an entire painting with one brand of paint, one brand of pastel and one softness of pastel. I think more commonly people start with hard pastels and gradually go to the softer one. They'll start with the harder pastels and go to the soft. You can use the harder pastels to blend these to rather than using your finger. And I'll show you some of that too. So, and these are very, very soft. Again, I'm just barely going to touch my hand. Light as a feather. And put those away because we're not really going to work with those at this point. Put the pumice away. Hope I don't knock it over. Making room here. Okay, so we're going to start with the most common paper, which is Canson. And I am going to show you the... Oh, another thing. I'm not going to because this is just a demo. Work with your paper almost at a straight up and down perpendicular position. And put something, wet paper towels or a little tray or something like that under your board to catch the dust. Try not to ever blow on it. You can turn it over and tap it. But if you blow it, you get all that pigment dust in the air. And I've done it for a long, long time, but there are some people who think they're sensitive to it. So just get in the habit of never blowing on it. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use these Master's Touch, and we're going to compare them. Now you can see right there the waffle pattern. Whoops. So no, I keep hitting the wrong button. Come on, Vicki. Okay. I think you'll be able to see that. I can't because I'm looking straight up at a light. But you can see the little circular pattern where it's the blanket or something that they put the paper on, or the slurry to get the water out of it, and that slurry imprints the paper, or that screen imprints the paper. If you've ever made paper, you'll know a little bit about what I'm talking about. So, let's go to that was the yellow. Let's go to the orange. I'm using the side of the stick. Sometimes I will use the edge of the side, the sharp edge. Sometimes I'll use the flat side. The main thing is it just gives you a different, let's see, that was that one. That was that one. I'm not paying attention. It just gives you a different stroke, and the whole thing is about variety. You know what? I goofed already. The colors are very similar here. And the orange, well, but I couldn't match the color, so I'm going to turn it over and tap it. I'm going to do red. These two are swapped. There's red. And there's red. Feels really similar to each other. The feel is good, the way it comes off the stick. I'm getting the same amount of dust off each one. Go to the darker blue. Again, we're not comparing color. We're not comparing color because I couldn't match it exactly. Lighter blue. And that greenish color, I'll do it. There's the kind of the greenish color from that set. Am I still in frame? I want y'all to see the texture in that, so bear with me. And I just put the greenish color down. Okay, this is the turquoise. And this is not turquoise, sort of, but okay, there you have it. The two brands are applying themselves very, very similar. I already broke one. Oh well. A lot of people save these crumbs. Now this particular paper is not suitable for wet media. So if you want to turn this red into orange, come back in and glaze it, and that was my good pastel. And glaze over it. If you want to gray down the purple, or gray down the blue, let's gray down the blue with orange, because orange and blue are complements. We can gray the purple down with yellow. If we want to make the look of foliage in an impressionistic style, put down a little bit of blue, put down a little bit of yellow, and without intermixing them, if you look at this from a distance, you will get the illusion of blue, of green, sorry. Oops, let me take you back out. As a drawing medium, now this is a painting medium where you're using the side of the pastel much like you would a loaded oil brush, okay? Or a big brush, 3/4 inch brush. So just kind of think about this making the same kind of mark this would make. you can tell by the amount of dust that the canson paper does not grab the pastel as good. So you tend to use strokes that keep that in mind, because once you fill this tooth up, you're done. Okay. Let's work now on this handmade paper. If you take water, now these sticks have binder already, remember? And I'm going to take this chunk. Let's say I had broken a stick. I can regrind that with water. Whatever the wad of the stick is that's broken, you can grind it with water and roll it out, and when it dries, the water activates the binder. Can you see that? Activates the binder and turns it back into pastel. And when you wet it, look at what a nice brush stroke that gives. Nice visual texture. Now that's from the stuff that's here. I'm going to get some other colors in this because I was dusting off my paper. Remember, this is artist pigment. I can come back in with the water from those crumbs that I broke, and I can use it. I have some little containers over there on my pastel work area that I will collect all the dust that's in my tray and keep it. I can mix it up. I can see evidence of little specks of other colors whenever I use the sticks that I make from that. Alright. You can use a watercolor background and put pastel on top of it. You can use acrylic. Acrylic is not really that good because it fills up the tooth of the paper. Watercolor does not. So watercolor is an excellent background for pastels. Now, this is one of my favorite techniques. And I'm going to use these because we're going to see what they do. I'm going to use, this is a very limited palette, so I'm just going to scumble color on this as if it were sky. And then I'm going to come back in with my lighter blue. I'm going to overlap them. This homemade ground is allowing a lot of the dust and every good sky needs variation in color, so you can add a little bit of that. Now, I have some odorless mineral spirits here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my lighter color, and I'm going to paint the odorless mineral spirits into that color and liquefy it. Depending on how much pigment you put down, you can make brush strokes that you can make show when you get finished. Okay? Does that make sense? These brush strokes will show. You can come back on top of it when it's dry, and you can continue putting pastel on it as long as you want. Now these are the cheaper pastels. You can use pure grain, you can use rubbing alcohol, water. All we're doing is dissolving that binder and coloring that pigment. I mean, these aren't, let me get another brush. These aren't dissolving quite the same. Look at this poor little brush. It's been used for all kinds of things. This is water. Okay. See what we got here. It's very granulated. Let me see what happens here. It will wipe right off. That could be also because this is that homemade surface. We're all about texture, okay? Now when that odorless mineral spirit dissolves, we'll come back to this. I'm going to dry this just a minute. I think this has some alcohol in it. Yep. I'm going to spray that right here on this red and orange. My fingers are so dirty. So you can see that the alcohol also dissolves it. We're dissolving the binder, and when it evaporates, the pigment will be attached to the paper, more or less. I've heard some pros and cons of not knowing what the alcohol will do to the paper long term. So just be aware of that. Do your own research. This is the area that I used I liquefied the pastel in the watercolor pan. Am I zoomed out? Nope, I want to go this way. Okay. And because it was dissolved into a paste form first, this is a smoother application. Now this is a really grungy bristle brush that's been used for oil paint. And I do not use my oil paint brushes with acrylics. I don't use my watercolor brushes with oils or acrylics. So I keep them separate. But because I was working with this technique with odorless mineral spirits, I used one of my oil brushes. The alcohol got us a real good smooth, and I smoothed that with a cloth. These should be fairly permanent. You can get a dry spot. I'm pulling up a little bit. Pulling up a little bit. But not like here. Now this is just dry pigment on canson paper. Picking up more. And it's blending it into the tooth Now here, if you don't want the pattern to show, you come over on this side and there's no pattern in the paper. There are a lot of artists who will put their first layers down and blend them and use that for their underpainting. The more you blend, the more you take away from the integrity of the color. And by that I mean pastel. The beauty in pastel is that each of the little tiny microscopic pigment particles catch the light in different ways, and that gives you the unique look of pastel. So the more you blend, the more you kill the color. And I am a big proponent in keeping colors separate. The more I blend this, the duller it's going to get, because I'm losing the integrity of the two colors separate. Okay? If that's the look you want, that's great. Just here to tell you some of the differences. If I were painting, I will go more to this technique than that, because I don't want to lose the integrity of my color. Now if I want to cool down part of that, or turn it a little more green, I'll come back in with one of the cool colors. Same rules apply here as they do with acrylic. The more cool color you use, the more brown you're going to get. But if you were working on an apple, or something similar to that, you can get a lot of color combinations with this palette, with these 12 colors. I often tell my students that you really only need a split primary. You need a warm and cool red, a warm and cool yellow, and a warm and cool blue. And with that, you can pretty well have a working palette. See all that dust there? Of course you do. See how that began to really tone down that color? Really grade it down. Now that comes in handy when you're doing a three-dimensional object like a ball. So let's just draw a ball. That's too big. I don't want to do that much. It's Friday afternoon. I don't want to do that much. Where the light comes is going to be your lightest value. I'm going to pick up green because that little circle was drawn with blue. Okay, and then your next darkest value. Well, with a very light touch, your colors can blend themselves where they overlap. A little bit of orange. A little bit of red. I'm just going to follow the color wheel here. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with using your fingers. I happen to prefer it when it's not. Purple. I tend not to like this version. And the bright blue is over here. I want the individual colors to keep their integrity so you can always tell where they are, what they are. And I'm going to use this kind of an umbery color. Tapping is good when you want to de-emphasize a spot. You don't want it as textured as you do up here. Now, consider that you're done with this. I want a little more blue in there. I want a little more purple. I like purple. I'm making kind of a rich shadow color over here. Now, if I wanted to, and really say the sun was really hitting there, I can come back in with white and hit that right in here. And I've made a nice field of mud down here. If I want a richer shadow, I come in and just very lightly glaze some red on top of that. Now I'm fast reaching the point where this paper won't hold any more pigment. And there you have it. Now in the artist grade pastels, let me grab one of those whites. Hang on. This is one of the softest. This is a unison. And I don't work on Canson paper, so we're kind of learning this together. This will lay down a little more pigment than the less expensive pastel. See that? Now if I wanted to come back in with that darker and do a shadow, the shadow is real hard when it's close to the object, and it softens out as it gets away from the object. So overall, I think those colors are pretty darn good. And now we're going to come back here. Now let's do the same thing over here. What do I want to do? I want to do this with the I want to do that same thing with my whole body. Okay. I'm not getting as much dust. Nice texture. I don't know what happened to my light blue. Each brand has its own unique shape. Purple. Let's do some yellow and some red. Now the wild card in this demonstration is that we don't know exactly what the different sides of this paper are. Knowing me, I would say they're pretty close to the same. Let's come in with water first. We're getting a similar granulation. Now the wild card here is you don't know if the paper is causing the reaction or if it's the brand of pastels, the type of pastels. Generally, this technique of wet is done with your harder, less expensive pastels. Artists tend to save their good pastels for the last and final layers. The blues, I'm getting the granulation much the same as we did over here. Now let's spray a little bit of alcohol down here. Some people are allergic to the white in the paper, meaning that they don't really want it. And others do. So it's just the look you're after. There are no rules. We'll see what the alcohol does with that blue that I've been talking about. See how the texture of the ground adds to the visual texture and physical texture. The alcohol really does a nice job. I need to get some more in my sprayer. Same technique I like to do in acrylic. I'm getting a lot of alcohol. Woohoo! That's pretty cool right there. And then we'll come back in with some color into the wet. I don't really recommend doing that with your stick, but hey. These are so inexpensive, it doesn't matter to me. I like drippies. Let them dry a little bit. You know what? I'm going to eliminate the possibility that this was a different surface. I'm going to do this down here with these inexpensives, with the Hobby Lobby brand. Why do I keep putting that one back down? Use a little bit of terp, odorless mineral spirits, but it performs the same function as terp. Alcohol. Now let's try it. Alright, I'm mostly dry. Gonna try the rub test. Not much. And that was with a lot of alcohol. Not much again. A lot of alcohol. So the alcohol is pretty cool. I've used it before, but I haven't tested it. The terp lifts a little bit. Yeah, the terp lifts quite a bit. The alcohol does not. That's interesting. Oof. Dry the alcohol again. One thing I do like is that it dries faster. I'll have to do some more research. Okay, so I have sprayed it again. And I'm not picking up much pigment, guys. Excuse me for burping in your ear. So that acted as a fixative. That one still didn't stay down, but a little bit there. That's interesting. I'll have to do some more research on alcohol as a fixative. Now, let's talk about fixatives just a minute. There are 1,000,001 fixatives on the market. Some artists use a workable fixative, and some swear by absolutely nothing, never, no way. And the reason is because fixative sprays change the color of the pastel. The lighter the color on the pastel, like to the lights and whites, it will almost disappear. So then you come back in after it's dry and reapply your lights. You will notice color shift. I've done some tests. I will also see if I can find those. I'm going to try this. See how dark it's the paper getting wet. Now, it may dry. We're going to see. Dried back up pretty good. A little bit of pickup. The thing about fixative is that it also allows you to come back in and add a little more color if you choose. So it will make, if this was completely, the tooth was completely filled, fixative will allow you to come back in and maybe make another layer or two. Okay? It's very interesting with the alcohol spray. Alright. You know what? I'm going to stick right here. Now, if this was a background for, I'm going to put the lid back on this. I don't want odorless mineral spirits all over my desk. Okay. I'll tamp down. Very interesting. Alright, the thing I also like is my little dots from the spray, the thick spray, are still there. They haven't gone anywhere. There's some crumbs floating around. Okay. Now, if we wanted to do, I'm going to pull out this Conte just for fun. It works the same way. It pretty much feels the same way. Now, when I paint faces, I paint shadow shapes. By that I mean I don't come in and draw the face with the eyes like I'm doing a pencil drawing. I like my light coming in from up there, so we're going to put this here to remind us. Are y'all seeing it okay? Now I'm going to bring this shadow shape down and under where the nose would be. Eyeball, eyeball, nose. The eyes are one eye width apart. The nose is one eye width apart. And the cheek is there. And the mouth will be about right there. I did that the wrong direction. It's okay. This is just for fun, right? Now I have very much politely messed up my lower lip. I like the way I did that. Just completely messed that up. So under the nose, the mouth comes right here. Now you would have, it's under the nose. If your eyeball was about right there, your eye is going to end about like that. Now under the mouth, the lower lip acts like that. I've got shadow shape under it. Now we've got hair. Okay. Don't get too detailed too early. I'm going to come in with some green, and I don't really have a good green out. This one's close. It's a little bit closer than that one. I was taught to use green for my shadow areas, because the skin is a warm tone, reddish, yellowish. And when you put green with red, you're going to get a grayed down red. Okay? Make sense? I'm going to use this yellow ochre color. I'm going to use the red. Oops, I was going to use these. I'm glazing over I really don't like using white. That's all we've got handy right here. I prefer a warmer color than a white. And my light is up here. I need a little bit more of the red right in here. Cool color across here because that's where the brow bone goes away from the light. Away from the light. Cool color. Some more yellow ochre. And I really got some texture going on in there. Very light. And I'm going to come in with my raw umber. See, I'm still not... Now, if I had that up like this, y'all couldn't see it, but the dust would have a tendency to fall. Basically, skin tone, for me, is cadmium reddish, which is a warm red, and yellow ochre, which is a darkish yellow. The whites of the eyes are never white. They're always a skin tone color, or even a lightish blue. I'm going to come back in with this black. The only time I ever will use a dark color. Very sketchy. I just really don't like using black. But we're limited here, right? With the colors we've got. And I've just made a big old mess of that eye. Well, this isn't going to win any prizes, guys. But that's not the point of this. This is my real soft white. If y'all tell anybody I did this bad, I'm going to use a little bit of my really soft pastels just so y'all can see. And I didn't pull. This gold is yellow ochre is probably pretty close. And I didn't pull a good green, but we're using what we've got, right? We would have some white along this edge. And we'll have a white in the chin. Baby, I made you really look orientalized. I like all the color. I love that blue on top of those others. Very lightly, not blending it in, but just letting it sit. And her neckline. Her ears would be right here. They attach even with the eye. And under the nose. Don't want to paint every hair, you just want the illusion. back in with the dreaded black. Make that iris. This is really soft pastel. Now the other reason I like working like this is that if you're working with it flat, you will have a tendency to get your proportions skewed, and I have done that. Her eyes are a little too close together, and I don't like it. You can't really tell. Now we're going to have a lesson in telling where it's off. Okay, so there's the width of one eye, there's the width of the other, and there's the width of that one. So, you know, it's really close, and for what we're doing here, it's very close, and I'm not unhappy. I'm rarely unhappy, but that's a lie. I'm a perfectionist. And we would have a light, but we are really on a limited palette here, so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Ooh, freaky baby, freaky baby. Now, if I'm really unhappy, that eye's not too bad. This one is freaky, and that brush was wet. Smooth move, X-Lax. I'll come in and wipe it out. Sorry I got all quiet there. Got some real texture in that paper right where that eyeball is. Better. somewhat. I'm going to hold this up a little bit. Y'all probably can't see it, but 2, 3, not too bad. The nose is a little bit long. The mouth is about right. So I tell you what, guys, there you have it, a quick little pastel demo using very inexpensive pastels and using a patterned background as a start. So I think I'm going to call that quits. I may add to it tomorrow a little bit. Very loose. Not bad. I'm happy. Over and out, and I will see you again